When he gets to Jerusalem this time, he's not going to leave Jerusalem. He's going to be crucified. And he knows that. And he tells them that right here in the bottom of page 1541 at Mark 16:32 through 34. You turn the page the next. We don't know if this happened immediately after that, but we know that the first two times that Jesus said that he was going to die, the first time Peter came and said, "Oh no, that's not going to happen to you." And he starts to rebuke Jesus, and then Jesus turned around and rebuked Peter and said, "No, no, no, get behind me, Satan." The second time, Jesus tells him he's going to die. And these may not have been close to each other. These could have been 6 months apart on each one. It says they just didn't understand what he was saying. They couldn't get it. Well, here's time number 3. Well, what's the first thing that happens after Jesus the third time tells them that he's going to die? Well, this is where we get started. On the top of page 1542, Mark chapter 10, verse 35. Is everybody with me? Okay, we're going to read 35 through 40, okay? And James and John, the sons of Zebedee, came to him. "Teacher," they said, "we want you to do for us whatever we asked." This is right after he tells them he's going to die. And what do? We want something. Okay, verse 36. "What do you want me to do for you?" They replied, "Let one of us sit at your right and at your left in your glory." Verse 38. "You don't know what you are asking." Let's stop right there for a second. If you say to somebody, you don't know what you're asking, what are you saying to them? I'm sorry, what? You don't know what's going to happen. And it could easily be something that you really don't like. There's a saying, be careful what you pray for because you might get it. He says, you don't know what you're asking. You may not like what you get. And then he goes on to explain what he means by that. Jesus said, "Can you drink the cup I drink, or be baptized with the baptism I am baptized with?" Is he talking about drinking juice out of a cup? No. That's not what those words are talking about. And to make it a little more clear, let's read the second part of it. Can you be baptized with the baptism I am baptized with? Has Jesus already been baptized? Yes, quite a while before. Is he going to be baptized in a baptism in water again? No. This is not talking about a water baptism. You might have a better understanding of this if you understand here 3 times the word baptized or baptism is said. What does the word baptism mean? What's the only thing it means? Immerse. So let's take the word baptize and baptism out of it and put in the word immerse and see if that helps a little bit. Can you drink the cup I drink or be immersed with the immersion I am immersed with? Now, what was Jesus immersed with and going to be immersed in? Not water. You said death, yeah. Not something good. And the cup that he's talking about is not talking about liquid in a cup. It's talking about something you're going to take in you that may be not happy for you. There are 2 different ways of saying the same thing. And he asked them this question. They said, "Let us sit at your left and right hand." Jesus says, you don't know what you're asking. Can you bring what I'm going to have? And they answer him, verse 39. They said, "We can." Do they know what they're saying when they say we can? No. They don't have a clue what's going to happen when they say we can. So Jesus continues on. Jesus said to them, "You will drink the cup I drink and be baptized with the baptism I am baptized with." What's he saying to them? You're going to have things happen to you you're not expecting, and you may not like one tiny bit. Now let's jump ahead a little bit. Who are these 2 guys, James and John? They're brothers, the sons of Zebedee, okay? Turn over to Acts chapter 12, verses 1 and 2. Acts chapter 12 is a distance down the line. It's in, the church has been started. This is after the time of a number of events, Cornelius and so on. This is very possibly over 10 years after the time the church starts, which means it's a number of years later from the time that Jesus is talking to James and John here. Acts chapter 12, verses 1 and 2. It was about this time that King Herod arrested some who belonged to the church, intending to persecute them. Here's the king. What can the king do in that time and day? I'm sorry? Right. Anything he wants. He's not restrained by a constitution. He's not restrained by a judiciary. He's not restrained by a legislature like we are in our country. He has no restraint. He can do anything he wants. Okay? The next sentence. He had James, the brother of John, to put to death with a sword. James is the first apostle to die. Maybe 10 years later. But James has to die. Doesn't have to, but Herod put him to death. Now, how about John? James, his brother, is the first apostle to die. Who's the last apostle to die? John, the other brother. Okay? Jesus said both of them are going to be immersed in the immersion that Jesus is immersed in. How about John? Well, I had to think about that one for a little bit, but turn over to Revelation chapter 1, verse 9. Who wrote Revelation? The same guy, John. In fact, he wrote quite a bit of the New Testament. He wrote the Gospel of John, 1st, 2nd, and 3rd John, and Revelation. That's a chunk. It's about a fourth of the entire New Testament. Revelation chapter 1, verse 9. With me? I, John, your brother in compassion, in the suffering and kingdom and patient endurance that are ours in Jesus. John's talking about his life right here. What's he say his life has been involving? Suffering, patient endurance. And where is he? Was on the island of Patmos because of the word of God and the testimony of Jesus. What do we know about the island of Patmos? It's out in the Aegean between Italy and, not between it. It's between Greece and Turkey. Okay, but what do we know about Patmos? What was Patmos? It's an island. Okay? What do you do on Patmos? Don't say anything you want to, because you can almost do nothing on Patmos. It's a little tiny island. But what was Patmos about? Who went to Patmos? Prisoners. But were they in a jail on Patmos? Yes and no. There was no jail, but the entire island was a jail. They couldn't get off the island for as long as the Romans decided they would stay there. Now, did ultimately John get off Patmos? Yes. He was not in Patmos when he wrote Revelation. Apparently, John eventually was let off the island by the Romans, and he went up to and was at Ephesus to the end of his lifetime. He was with the congregation in Ephesus. There's some records in the 2nd century of the church in Ephesus knowing about John being there, and so on. But did John have an easy life? No. John had a hard life. How about that? Okay, anyway, getting back to Mark chapter 10. Jesus said to them, verse 39, you will drink the cup I drink and be baptized with the baptism I am baptized with. Verse 40, but to sit at my right or left is not for me to grant. They asked Jesus for Jesus to give them something, and Jesus said, I can't give it to you. Why not? Go on, read on. These places belong for those to whom they have been prepared. It's not something you can have somebody give you. In a sense, I think he's saying you got to earn it. But what did they want to do? They wanted to be at Jesus' right and left hand in his glory. That doesn't mean on earth, that means in heaven. Okay? Now, who sat to the right of the king? Where you got a king, you got a throne. Who sits on the right? Number one. Okay? Who sits on the right of that person or the left on the other side of the king? Numbers 2 and 3. That's what they were asking for. They wanted to be in positions numbers 2 and 3 with Jesus in heaven. And Jesus says, can't give it to you. Verse 41. Well, let's stop there for a second. Any comments on any of that we've said so far? Now, 41 through 45 isn't changing the subject. You may think it is, but it's not. It's still talking about James and John who asked Jesus to give them something that they had no right to ask for. Okay? So listen to 41 through 45. When the 10 heard about this, that is what Jesus said to them, that they weren't going to get what they asked for, the 12, and then James and John are 11 and 12, 10, 11, 12. When the 10 heard about this, they became indignant with James and John. What does indignant mean? Indignant. Really bad. Yeah, it's not a compliment. It means angry. They became angry. They became indignant with James and John. Jesus called them together. Now he's talking to the 12. And said, you know that those who are regarded as rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their high officials exercise authority over them. Not so with you. Now the you there is obviously talking to the 12 apostles. But folks, it's not just talking to them. Jesus is talking to the rest of us also, and we'll make that clear here in just a second. Not so with you. You are not to be rulers and exercising authority over people. The apostles were leaders. The apostles became the leaders of the church in Jerusalem, the first congregation. And on Wednesday night, we're studying the book of Acts. By about 4 or 5 years at the most after the church in Jerusalem was started, how many members did they have? In one congregation, in one city, about 10,000. And who were the leaders of that congregation? The apostles. Later on, they developed elders, but not for quite a while. It says the apostles. What a position of authority. What a position of maybe could be arrogance and domination. Jesus is saying to these guys right now that here are never dreaming that they're going to be responsible for 10,000 people. Never in their thoughts, never in their minds. Okay. Not so with you. Instead, whoever wants to be great among you must be your servant, and whoever wants to be first must be slave of all. For even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many. Do you see what Jesus is saying to them right here? He says, you guys have to be different from the way that kings think they got to rule. You guys have got to be different in how you treat people, how you think about people, and how you think of your job. And it's all summed up in verse 45. It's hard for me to talk about. Bear with me. The key phrase here in verse 45 is to be served or to serve. These are two very, very different attitudes about how to live your life. Am I looking for someone to serve me all the time? Am I looking for someone to serve? Now, is there anything wrong with me being served? No. We go to a restaurant, we have a waiter. We want that waiter to serve us. You know, that's the way it works. Okay? Sometimes we come to church and we want to sink it in, what we're hearing. We want to hear the prayers and hear the songs. Maybe we've had a really, really bad week and we need to receive something here, you know? There's nothing wrong with that. But what happens if that's your attitude about all of life and all of your relationships? This is poison. Okay? To serve or to be served. As I was reading about this over and over this week, I only thought of about 50 examples. And I finally ended up with 2 that I'm going to tell you. And since I said that, I might as well tell you right now. That seems to epitomize to me how this can be a choice. I'm going to tell you a true story of a husband and wife that I knew. None of them are here. You don't know either of these people. They don't live near here. Trust me, I'm not talking about anybody here at all. Husband and wife, they're sitting at house one night. Oh, and the wife told me this. And she said, I'm telling exactly what happened. And I believe her. Okay, anyway, they're having a discussion one evening, and the husband says, I don't understand why I can't keep a guy friend. I meet guys, I like them, they like me, we're getting done, we laugh together, we do things together, and then after a while, they don't come around, they don't return my calls. I can't keep a guy friend. Why can't I keep a guy friend? And apparently he whined on about this for a while until she finally said, I'm going to tell him why. And she said, let me tell you why. You make a friend, and then shortly you're asking him to come over and help you do this. And then next week you're asking him to come over and help you do something else. And the next week you're asking him to come over and help you do something else. And he comes. And then after a while he doesn't do that anymore. He disappears. And he was looking at her like, yeah. And she said, it's because you never help them. You don't do anything for them. It's always what you get out of the deal. You notice how my hand did that way? What you get out of the deal. And after a while, they feel like you're using them, and that's why they don't come around. And she said to me, the guy said, well, why should I help them? What do I get out of it? Does that sound like the guy is paying attention or listening? And the wife said to him, this was the end of the thing, the wife said to him, that's why you have no male friends. Now, I would like to tell you that as the time went on, because I was still involved with this husband and wife for a while after that, some years after that he learned his lesson. And the answer is no, he didn't. And he started teaching his children the same way. And I'm going to tell you one tiny little story involving his daughter that will say everything that I'm trying to say to you about it. The wife was the daughter was young, 7, 8, and she's taking a bath, and the mother had gone out in another room with the door open, and so she came back to see how the girl was doing, and the girl said, "Mother, towel!" Just like that. That's how the mother told me. And I said, "What'd you do?" And she said, "What I wanted to do was go over and choke her." She said, "But I got the towel and I gave her the towel." But what does that child's statement say about how the child was thinking about to be served or to serve? And I hate to say it, but the son that they also had was exactly the same way. I didn't want to be around those folks after a while. The mother, the wife, was actually pretty decent, but the man was terrible, and those children were worse. Ugh. Didn't want to be around him. Okay, here's number 2. I had 2 daughters, and one of them had more boyfriends than you could count. And they came and went and came and went and came and went. And there's a variety of reasons for all that kind of thing. You know, kids are kids and things change. But as she got older, she was living in an apartment in Davison, and she was going to start living with a guy that she lives with right now, about 7 miles that way. And I get along real well with my daughter now. Back then, not so well. And she was getting ready to leave the apartment to go start living in his house for the first time. And I thought, I got to say something. And I said, Ida, I want to say something to you. One sentence, it's because I love you. And she knew she wasn't going to like it then when I said that. And here's what I said to her. A man won't stay with a woman who screams. My daughter at times was a real screamer. And why would she scream? Always. Why? To have her way. And I said, a man will not stay with a woman who screams. I'm very happy to tell you that they're still together, they're happy, and she doesn't scream at him. Once, occasionally, a little bit. She has a hard way to get out of that habit. But she doesn't scream. She'll talk a little loud once in a while, but I haven't heard her scream at him in a long, long time. That's my two little stories. To serve or be served. I could go on, and I don't want to beat the dead horse. But I will say this final statement on this. Now I want to move on to anything you want to say. We'll have time for that. We're reading the Gospel of Mark. If you get nothing out of anything I say today or anything in this entire class, I hope you will get Mark 10:45. I would love for you to memorize this verse. And every once in a while, think about what it means to serve or be served. And think about, how am I living my life with people? How am I in the relationships I have with people? How do I treat people when I go into a store to shop? How do I treat my family? How do I treat my kids? How do I treat strangers? Is my attitude only what I can get out of everything? And again, my hand is going like this. Or is it what I can do for somebody else? There's nothing wrong with being served. But if that's your whole attitude in life, you are doomed. I'm done. You ever think, were their feet dirty? No, not really. Jesus was trying to give them an example of how they should treat other people. Bill? Okay, church. If a person comes to church just for what they get instead of what they can do to help, what good are they to the church? Zero. Really. And I don't think God is pleased with that. If we come to church thinking, what can I do here to be a little bit of a help? And it can be something dirt simple. I think I told you a story of a congregation I was at years ago down in Arkansas. And there was a fellow who could never talk. He was married, he had children. His wife could talk, the kids could talk. He could, for some reason, and he wasn't stupid, he couldn't talk. He had never talked in his whole life. Now, what can a guy like that do? Not much, you think. And yet, at that congregation, every Sunday, he was there greeting people and shaking their hand. Couldn't say a word to them. But we used to get a little handout kind of thing, gospel minutes. Remember the gospel minutes? We used to have that here. That church had gospel minutes. He would shake people's hand and hand them a gospel minutes. He couldn't teach them, but the thing could. And after church, he'd be shaking hands with people as they left, smiling at them. Couldn't talk, but he was there. That's what he could do. And he really impressed me. Because with what his limitations, he was doing a whole lot more than other people were. Okay. Any Tom?
The other thing that just back up a little bit ahead of that sort of struck me too is when James and John went to Jesus, they said, we want you to do for us whatever we ask.
Oh, yeah.
And I think to myself, a lot of times we
Sure.
the message here is that sometimes no is the right answer when we ask for something. And it's hard for us to know because probably none of us ask for something that we want to know for. I mean, unless it's that kind of a question. So I was just thinking, Jesus explained that this is not for me to do. I don't get to make that decision. It's not for me. But I think there's a lot of other times when it's not that kind of a high level question. But it's a great lesson for us to learn.
Yeah.
We're going to ask for things, and it almost felt like when I read that, it's like, hey Jesus, we're God. This is what I need you to do. Kind of.
Yeah.
And I sort of try to question myself sometimes when I take something to God. Am I really thinking about it the right way? And because it's pretty easy to just have a whole laundry list of things that we want God to do for us.
Yeah, so how do we pray? Our prayer is full of God do this for me, God do this for me, God do this for me. Could we maybe pray for God to help us do what we should be doing? Two completely different attitudes about life. Two completely different attitudes about life. And when Jesus said, that, don't be like the rulers of the Gentiles, you must be a servant, he's still talking about James and John. He's giving them the real answer to what they ask up here at the top, like you just said. 35 through 45 are all connected. Okay, any other comments, or can we move on? I really wondered if we spent our whole time on this business about serve and be served. But it's okay. Okay, let's go. Starting at verse 46, we're going to talk about Bartimaeus. Goes down to verse 52. Okay, the rest of the chapter. Then they came to Jericho. Where's Jericho? Well, it's down the mountain from Jerusalem. Jesus is getting close to Jerusalem where he's going to be crucified. Okay? Then they came to Jericho. As Jesus and his disciples, together with a large crowd, were leaving the city, a blind man, Bartimaeus, which means son of Timaeus, was sitting by the roadside begging. When he heard that it was Jesus of Nazareth, he began to shout, "Jesus, son of David, have mercy on me." Many rebuked him and told him to be quiet. But he shouted all the more, "Son of David, have mercy on me." Jesus stopped and said, "Call him." So they called the blind man. "Cheer up, on your feet. He's calling you." Throwing his cloak aside, he jumped to his feet and came to Jesus. "What do you want me to do for you?" Jesus asked him. The blind man said, "Rabbi, I want to see." "Go," said Jesus. "Your faith has healed you." Immediately he received his sight and followed Jesus along the road. Isn't that a great story? People were telling the blind guy to shut up. Jesus finally hears the blind guy hollering out louder and louder. And he says, "Let him come to me." He takes care of him. There's one verse in here I want to ask you a question about. It's kind of a silly verse, but a silly thing, but why not? Verse 50. They told him, "Get on his feet. Jesus is calling you." Throwing his cloak aside, he jumps to his feet and came to Jesus. What is unusual about that, what this says? Did you catch anything that's unusual? Yes, and what's the deal about that? Why is that unusual? I can't hear you. No, not really. Okay, there's 3 pieces of clothing for men, okay, and really women the same, but a different kind of clothing. One is the undergarment, okay? Remember when Jesus is on the cross, it says in this translation, his undergarment. That was around his waist here. Okay, that's what we think of as underwear. Okay, then you have an outer garment, which would go down below your knees. And then you have a cloak, which is above your outer garment. It's not indecency to take off your cloak. You with me? In fact, what was the cloak used for? Well, it kept you warm when you're walking, but it was also your blanket at night. And a lot of these folks didn't have houses. They lived in tents. They needed something to warm them up. That was the cloak at night. Now, more important than that, how many sets of clothing did most ordinary Jews have in the first century. Tom put his one finger up. Yes, that's true. In fact, in the Old Testament, this was also true. And if a person received a gift of a set of clothing, like an inner and outer garment, that was considered a fantastic gift, because now maybe you had two. How wide is your closet at home? We won't go into that. There's nothing wrong with having. That's a different problem. That's why you need a different closet. No, he didn't. I think the answer is right here. The guy's blind. He thinks Jesus can help him. The people are telling him to shut up. Jesus says, "Come to me." He gets up, throws his cloak off, and runs. The cloak was one of his most valuable things in his life. But to get to Jesus, he would leave it, at least temporarily. I suspect after he was healed, he walked back over and picked up his cloak. Yeah. That's possible. I think it's because he was so excited myself. He had hope that Jesus could heal his blindness. For at least a while, yeah. Because it was, yeah. If you were blind, what would you give to get your sight? Anything. He was overjoyed that Christ had come to me. Couldn't come on his own. He couldn't see. Any more comments on that? Go ahead. He didn't give up. He felt his hope walking away from him, and he gave it all he could to get help. Comments? Anything else? Yeah.
I don't know the time span from when this scene happened to the story that you just read right before it. Was it days, weeks, whatever?
Well, it took a little time because it says, then they came to Jericho. There's been some travel there.
But I think the choice of words that Jesus used in verse 31, it ties into the story before. Jesus says, "What do you want me to do for you?" Versus what James and John said, "We want you to do for us." Jesus was reinforcing the phrase, "You are here to serve." Jesus is saying, he's saying it to this man.
Yeah. And I don't agree with you. By the way, it's 36, not 31. What do you want me to do for you? But at any rate, I'm agreeing with you, because whether or not there's some time passing here, and there obviously is because they were walking to Jericho, Mark put this story right after the previous story. And that by itself is a connection that can be exactly what you're saying. Sure. Okay? Are we done here?
Yeah, I just thinking, how would it feel to be sitting in the dirt, waiting for constantly Christ coming down the road? Yeah. I would think that cloak was a symbol of what was not important to him anymore, because Christ was coming down
Sure.
the road, and he knew he was going to be healed, because Christ healed for his faith, so Christ knew he had faith about being healed.
And he knew about Jesus. And he had confidence in him. And he was wanting to be healed of his blindness.
It's like the cloak became the last thing he cared about.
That's right, exactly. Although it was important, right then it was not. And a poor guy like him would have only had one set of clothing. He'd only had one cloak. That's all there was to it. Are we good? Let's go on to the next section, chapter 11. We're going to read verses 1 through 11. Okay? As they approached Jerusalem and came to Bethphage and Bethany at the Mount of Olives, Jesus sent two of his disciples, saying to them, "Go to the village ahead of you, and just as you enter it, you will find a colt tied there, which no one has ever ridden. Untie it and bring it here. If anyone asks you, 'Why are you doing this?' say, 'The Lord needs it, and we'll send it back here shortly.'" They went and found a colt outside in the street, tied to a doorway. As they untied it, some people standing there asked, "What are you doing untying that colt?" They answered as Jesus had told them to, and the people let them go. When they brought the colt to Jesus and threw their cloaks over it, same word here, cloaks, the outside garment, threw their cloaks over it, he sat on it. Many people spread their cloaks in the road, while others spread branches they had cut in the fields. Those who went ahead and those who followed shouted, "Hosanna!" By the way, what does Hosanna mean? Look down at the bottom. There's an A there here. A Hebrew expression meaning save, which became an exclamation of praise. They're praising God by saying that word, Hosanna. "Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Blessed is the coming kingdom of our father David. Hosanna in the highest heaven." Jesus entered Jerusalem and went into the temple courts. He looked around at everything, but since it was already late, he went out to Bethany with the 12. He left town and went out with the 12, where they stayed the night. Okay? Now, there's one thing I hope you picked up on. The word cloaks again, remember? They put their cloaks, a very significant piece of their clothing, on the colt for Jesus to ride on. How about that? And others put their cloaks on the road for Jesus to ride over on the colt. What does that say? It says how much they valued him. Now, this doesn't say it right here, but you know what this is called? This event is called elsewhere. In other translations, it'll say it's called a triumphal entry. If it's a triumph, do you know what a triumph is? Someone want to tell me what a triumph is? Well, if you win the football game, it's a triumph, right? Okay, but in the first century, what was a triumph? It was a parade. And who did the parade? The winners, okay? And for example, there's a record of when the Romans destroyed Jerusalem in AD 70. They had a triumph when they came back to Rome, and it lasted for 3 days. Really? On day one, the first thing that they had coming in on carts and carts and carts, I mean, this took hours for this to happen. On day one was the booty, the gold, the silver, the things that they had taken from the Jews, killed the Jews and took their property and this, that, and the other. That took a full day. And why were the Romans so happy about that? Because they knew that a bunch of their relatives were in the legions. The soldiers were going to get a good hunk of this stuff. Okay? And the city of Rome was going to get a good hunk of this stuff, and the city of Rome was going to distribute a hunk of this stuff to the citizens of Rome. They were seeing money coming to them, value coming to them on day one. That was day one. Pretty good day, huh? What's day two? Day two is the slaves. And they brought thousands and thousands of Jewish slaves with them to Rome. Long way to walk, huh? Because they didn't put them on cruise liners and take them. They walked them from Judea to Rome. That could have taken months all by itself. Really. Day two was bringing the slaves in. Thousands of slaves. And the Roman citizens were just happy as to be because of these slaves coming in. Why? Guess where the slaves are going to end up? With the Roman citizens. And guess what? Each slave is... What's the point with a slave? Their value, their money. The slaves could be bought and sold. The slaves could be worked for free. I mean, they had to sleep someplace, they had to eat something, but there was no payroll. They didn't get a paycheck, okay? And that was all of day 2. Thousands of these slaves coming in. What was day 3? The army, the soldiers. This is their relatives, their friends, their people of the city of Rome. Hurrah! And there were thousands of them. Remember I told you maybe you don't remember this stuff. A legion was around 8,000 to 14,000 people, depending on if they had cavalry. Cavalry was a whole bunch more. But a legion itself was often around 10,000 or more, okay? The size of a legion was always considered to be enough soldiers to win any battle they went into. And because the Romans were very well equipped and they had good discipline and they actually had shields that could lock into the shield next to them. And it was a very well organized army. They would win battles, okay? And for years in the Jewish place, Judea, there was one Roman legion, okay? But when they had to attack Jerusalem, do you know how many legions they took to attack Jerusalem and destroy the city? 3. Which means there were probably 35 to 40 to 45,000 soldiers that came into Rome on day 3. And do you know they didn't have a real wide area to come into? Because what did they walk under when they first got to the edge of the city? It's a structure that is still there today. I went to Rome, I saw it, I took some pictures of it. It's called the Arch of Titus. It's still there. You can go to Rome today, you can see the Arch of Titus. Well, why do they call it the Arch of Titus? Because Titus was the Roman emperor and the winner of that battle. And they named it because that was the memorial to the victory of the Romans defeating the Jews and the 3 days triumph. You with me? We're going to have to stop. It's coming up. It's 15 till. Not quite finished here. And they all had to walk under the arch. And it's not that wide. You can maybe get 10 people across or something like that. But if you've got 45,000 people, how long does it take to get at 10 wide? How long does it take to get 45,000 people? It takes hours. And that was day 3. 3 full days of people screaming and hollering and happy and getting value and slaves and money and gold and silver. It was a really good 3 days for Rome. And they walked under the Arch of Titus, and you can go today and see the Arch of Titus.
Chris brought up an interesting point about this story, is that that was a colt that no one had sat on. And Chris said, have you ever tried to go up to a colt and sit on it? That you sit on it long. I mean, they have to be trained. This was a colt that nobody sat
Yeah.
on. Yet Jesus got on it and it was a big deal.
It was a pretty big deal that they were able to take the colt and walk away with it. But it worked. Jesus said it would work, it worked. And it worked for him. The triumphal entry. They call it triumphal entry because it was like the parade that the Romans did coming in after a thing was war. Jesus is coming to Jerusalem. Well, right here at chapter 11 in the Pew Bible, it says, Jesus come to Jerusalem as a king. He's not a king like they think of as king. Okay, we're done. 15 till. Time to stop. Thank you very much.